Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. So, after the success of my last video covering IDW Sonic, thank you guys that you watched that you liked it, and that you commented on it. That was my longest video I ever did. It was the one I put the most work into, so I'm glad that it paid off. I could have done it a bit better, I'll admit, but I'm still very proud of it. But, since that passion project of mine did so well, and I kind of expected it would do well, judging by the topic, I figured now I can make something that probably won't do too well, but it's something I want to make, which, to be fair, all these videos are videos I want to make. So I thought, you know what, it's time to cover the show that stars the super dude extraordinaire who runs around in underwear and his brain is coated in chocolate. It's Freakazoid. Now, I bet none of you know who Freakazoid is. Maybe you've heard of him or you've seen him, but you don't know Freakazoid. And I don't blame you, because Freakazoid is sadly pretty obscure. So, a quick history lesson on what Freakazoid is. It's a superhero parody cartoon from the 90s produced by none other than Steven Spielberg. Because you gotta remember, back in the 90s, he was kind of running a cartoon empire. He did Tiny Toons, which I've never watched. Don't really have any interest in it. He did Animaniacs, which is amazing. And then during Animaniacs' run, Warner Brothers decided they wanted their own TV channel, their own TV network. So they started the WB, where they continued Animaniacs. They gave Pinky and the Brain their own spin-off. That's a good show. And they did an original show, the final animated show, Steven Spielberg, Freakazoid. So, like I said, Freakazoid is a superhero parody, and it is bonkers. So weird. If you've seen the other Spielberg cartoons, you'd probably know what to expect, but even then, Freakazoid still stands out on its own, which is, unfortunately, one of the reasons why it got cancelled, but I'll talk about that later. So, I guess no more history lessons. It's just time to dive on into Freakazoid and why it is just an amazing show that deserves more respect. So, Freakazoid is one of the greatest superheroes ever, naturally. Freakazoid is such a great protagonist, because he just embodies the zaniness of this show. You know how, if you've seen Animaniacs, the original one, not the terrible revival, if you've seen the original Animaniacs, you know that a lot of those characters are designed to be like old Looney Tunes characters. The Warners are clearly meant to invoke Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, that kind of thing. Freakazoid is interesting in that, well, he definitely feels a lot like those characters. There never really was a Looney Tunes cartoon about some kind of wacky superhero, and as far as I know, there aren't any other silly, goofy superhero parody characters. At least none that came before Freakazoid. So he was pretty original. He is just insane. The theme song, the lyrics, which you should just look it up on YouTube, the theme song perfectly describes how insane he is. It goes, I said it in the beginning, a super dude extraordinaire who runs around in underwear, Freakazoid, Freakazoid. When the lyrics is, his brain's overloading, it has a chocolate coating. He is just hilarious. The joke with him is that he's a superhero who is kind of a terrible superhero. This is one of my favorite jokes, is that he wants to fly, but he can't fly, so this is a running gag. He just runs around with waving his arms, going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It's really funny. Also, you would think by looking at him that he has electric powers or something, because of the bolt in his hair, and if you look at the theme song, but I don't think he has electric powers. He kind of emits lightning when he runs fast, because I guess his superpower is supposed to be super strength and super speed. I don't really want to say what his origin is, because you should just watch the show and find out. The theme song kind of says what it is anyway, but there's a lot more to it. But whatever, we'll focus on that later. So, he's just a really goofy character. And I didn't start watching the show until about halfway through season 2, and then I watched the rest of it afterward. So, for a while, I thought he didn't have a secret identity, because for most of the show, you don't see a secret identity. He just runs around as a superhero, and I appreciate that. He's just a funny guy. So he doesn't really want to waste time with his family. Although when it does get to his family, it is quite funny, but that's for later. So he's just goofy superhero that talks super fast and weird, and he is just brilliant vocal performance, by the way. It takes a lot of energy to be able to voice a character like this, and Paul Rudd's performance is just perfect. It's amazing. And fun fact, he never even meant to get the role of Freakazoid. He's a voice actor and a writer, but he was just meant to be a writer for the show. He was actually one of the story editors. But the show was about to start animating. They were about to start recording it, and they said, we still don't have a voice for our main character. Paul, you do it. So he just came in, he did a temp session, and then they sent it in to Steven Spielberg, and they asked him, do you want this guy to voice Freakazoid? And he said, yeah, sure, let him do it. Paul Rudd was completely shocked that he got the role, and he was really expecting them to replace him after a couple episodes, but they never did replace him. And boy, we're so lucky he did not get replaced. He's perfect. I mentioned that he does have a secret identity, even though you don't see it that much. So that would be this guy, Dexter Douglas. So the joke is that Freakazoid is this super wacky, manic character who talks super fast, and his secret identity is some boring old computer nerd who's a complete loser and basically lives in his room. Now, it's not that he puts up a facade as Freakazoid or whatever. No. It's that when he turns into Freakazoid, his personality changes. He's basically a different character. So that's where the contrast is supposed to be. Dexter lives with his brother. Well, he's 17, so it makes sense he'd live with his family. He lives with his brother and his parents. And his family is just a bunch of idiots. There's this running gag where some guy knocks on his family's door and says, hi, I know your son. What are you here for? I'm his driving instructor. Oh, in that case, come in. Or, I'm his driving instructor. He already has one. Oh, then I'm his guidance counselor. Okay, come on in. There's also this running gag that his brother sees, just randomly gets beat up by Freakazoid, because Freakazoid wants to mess with his brother. And then he disappears, and so Freakazoid's brother, Duncan, is telling his parents, but Mom, Dad, I keep telling you, there's that weirdo blue guy who keeps following me. And his parents say, well, of course you think he's real. That's because you're insane. In Season 1, you see Dexter more than you do in Season 2. I guess the writers just realized it was better to just stick to Freakazoid, but whenever he does show up, he's still certainly funny. And I mentioned that I wouldn't really talk about his origin, and I still don't really feel like it, because to do that, I'd have to describe an entire episode and a half, which you really should just see for yourself. But of course, the show is one of the greatest running gags ever. And that would be with Freakazoid and Sergeant Mike Cosgrove, voiced by the late Ed Asner, of all people. So Ed Asner has actually done quite a bit of voice acting. He was J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man the Animated Series. He was a star of Up, so he definitely can do voice acting, but those were also more serious roles, In Freakazoid, he's basically Freakazoid's sidekick. So he's his friend on the police force. And the joke is just that whenever Freakazoid's about to run to fight a bad guy or something, Cosgrove shows up out of nowhere and says, hey Freakazoid, you want to go to such and such place? Like this one, he says, hey Freakazoid, you want to get a sandwich? And then he just cuts to them eating sandwiches, and Freakazoid asks him, hey Cosgrove, how come you like to eat? How come you're not married? He says, well, I like to eat meat. Cosgrove, you can get married and still eat a lot of meat. Oh, I didn't know that. There's some other running gag. There's another version of this joke where Freakazoid is running to his high school to save it from a monster. And then Cosgrove shows up and says, hey Freakazoid, you want a mint? And then it cuts to them eating a mint, and he says, oh boy, that was the best mint I've ever tasted! And Cosgrove says, Freak, I heard there are cave guys tearing up the high school. Don't you go there? I'd get on that if I were you, but that's just me. And then what's funny is that the joke just gets increasingly crazier and crazier as it goes on. First, it's usually just them stopping by restaurants or whatever. By one of the last episodes, heck, not even one of the last episodes, just the Season 1 finale, only halfway through the show, you get to them going to see Spackle. A museum of Spackle. Spackle is what they put on walls to make them sturdy or something. That's just how ridiculous this joke gets. It's really funny. Also, Cosgrove has more than just this joke, though. He also just delivers all his lines in this very deadpan way, where he barely emotes. You never see his eyes, but it just really adds to the comedy for me. Like this part where he's just stuck in a car with Freakazoid and his butler and Freakazoid's girlfriend who's been turned to stone, and he's just sitting there. Like his expression barely changes while everyone else is really expressive. I guess a quick note on this scene. His butler is one of the funniest characters. Although he doesn't show up until the show, like the last 23% of the show, so he's barely in it, but his butler is really funny. He's voiced by Jonathan Harris. He was in A Bug's Life. He didn't have that many lines, but he was in it. So his claim to fame is that he was on this old TV show called Lost in Space, where he played this very stuck-up doctor character who always banter with this robot. I've never really seen Lost in Space, just clips of it, but I knew what the show was. Since you've probably never seen Lost in Space, the humor of him might not work for you, but they're constantly making references to that show with him. When he first appears, everyone keeps asking him, "Weren't you in that show with a robot?" And he speaks exactly the same as he did in Lost in Space. There's this one part where he says, "We're lost in space!" Oh, forget it. It's really too bad he didn't show up that much, because I would have loved a focus episode on him or something. There's also my favorite villain in the show, because, Freakazoid is a superhero, and that would be the Lobe. The Lobe is an evil, mad scientist guy with a giant brain as a head. Now, I can tell the writers love the Lobe probably just as much as I do, and other people I know who watch this show, because he is by far the most recurring villain. The Lobe is so funny. So, the joke is that Freakazoid just always bumps into him in just the most mundane of places. Freak is grocery shopping, and what happens? The Lobe is also grocery shopping. And they might get into some kind of dumb argument that leads to them fighting each other. That's pretty... Or there's an episode where they accidentally meet each other in the mall, and then the Lobe traps Freakazoid and Cosgrove in some kind of virtual reality video game because Freakazoid made fun of his hat. Because, with a head as big as his, he has to get a big hat. But my favorite appearance of the Lobe is this episode where Dexter, he's going, he can't fight the Lobe because he just beats him up easily, has no banter with him, and says, "Sorry, I got a date." But when the Lobe breaks out of prison, he's asking his henchmen, "Why can't we ever do anything fun? All we ever do is go to the lair." And they're asking him, "Well, we could go stop by the video store or something." And he says, "I don't want to stop by the video store. I want to go out, live." So, as Dexter is going to this restaurant to have a date, it just so happens the Lobe shows up to this restaurant where he ends up engaging in this massive it might have been longer than 3 minutes, this massive musical number where he just starts singing and everyone else starts singing along with him. It's so weird, but it's brilliant. It's just it's so funny. There are other villains in the show, of course, like this guy on the left. His name is Gutierrez. He is part of Freakazoid's origin story, although he does show up afterward. So him and the other villain I'll talk about, Cave Guy, they both tie into the fact that this show really loves to make fun of old actors, or just celebrities in general. You'll have a lot of random pop-ups or parodies of actual people who were on TV or on the radio or whatever. So, Gutierrez is supposed to be an impression of Ricardo Montalban, who's some old-timey actor on Broadway. In fact, I think he might actually be voiced by Ricardo Montalban. And then you have this guy, Cave Guy, who's voiced by the legendary Jeff Bennett. So, the joke with him is just that he looks like some big caveman monster, but then it turns out he speaks in this very intelligent fashion. And he's supposed to be an impression of Jim Backus. If you've ever seen Gilligan's Island, which you should totally check out, you probably know who Jim Backus is. He voices the rich guy. So he speaks and you'll see him going around tearing up cars, but it begins to speak in this very sensible way. He doesn't even sound like a supervillain. He just sounds like some rich dude or something. There's this joke where he says, "I don't like to be called a caveman. I'm a Neanderthal American," or something like that. There are other villains, but there are a lot of them, and I don't want to tell you every single thing about the show, because again, you should watch it for yourself. So these are just the two that appear the most aside from the Lobe, so they're the ones who are the most worth mentioning. Now, during Season 1, the show was like Animaniacs, where it had 2 to 3 segments per episode, and yeah, they usually had one segment about Freakazoid and then one segment about some other character. Sometimes there were one-offs, like the Amazing Johnny Quest parody they did, or the kind of lame segment about gnomes or whatever, but there are 2 recurring segments in Season 1. The Huntsman and Lord Bravery. I do not like the Huntsman gags, because there are 3 of them. There's something like 2 minutes long, and a minute of them is just the intro to his story. And the joke is just that he's a superhero and he wants to fight bad guys. Whenever he walks into the police station to ask about it, there's nothing going on. No robberies, nothing. So he just complains about how he has no villains to fight, and then it ends. It's just a complete waste of time. Like I said, they do 3 of these segments, and it's the exact same every single time. They can be kind of funny, but it just feels like a waste of time. The Lord Bravery segments are actually pretty funny. The joke is that he's a superhero, except nobody knows who he is. He's constantly trying to make a name for himself, but nobody cares about him. Or whenever they do ask him to do something, it's something like, hey, clean up this mess or something. He's never really asked to fight evil like he wants to. Lord Bravery is actually pretty funny. And apparently he's based on Monty Python, so that's something, I guess. But in Season 2, they just dropped the extra segments. They do one episode that has 2 segments, but both of them are about Freakazoid, so it's not really the same. The writers talk about in interviews and stuff like that they intentionally dropped the extra characters in Season 2 because they just figured the show would be funnier if it were just about Freakazoid, and I have to agree. But there's the question of, why did the show fail? As it seems its only audience was in a number of state institutions. But this show unfortunately did flop. It had 24 episodes. It had a full first season of 13 episodes. Season 2 only got to be 11. For the second season to be cut short, the show probably didn't just do poorly. It must have miserably failed. The writer said that in an interview, we didn't know when it aired, and we wrote the thing. Even they couldn't watch it. Because I'm not entirely sure about this, but I can imagine when the show first premiered, it was one of the starting shows of the WB. The WB was a very popular network. It eventually got rebranded into the CW, and it was running right alongside Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, those kinds of shows. I don't know if it was on right after them or right before them, but it was on around the same time. Good Saturday morning block. But here's the thing: Freakazoid is in some ways very similar to Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, but also very different. It has a lot of the reference humor, the crazy slapstick, the really good animation, a similar art style. It's also produced by Steven Spielberg, same writer, same voice actors, etc., even the same composer. But the thing is, while Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain may have had a lot of reference jokes and parodies that may have gone over kids' heads, I'm sure the parents watching with the kids liked them though, but they still have so much slapstick and stuff like that anyone can appreciate, anyone can enjoy. The thing about Freakazoid, though, is that as much as it has a lot of those jokes, it arguably leans more into reference humor than Animaniacs does. Or maybe the proper term isn't necessarily that it leans more into reference humor, but it leans more into, you really have to know the thing to understand the joke sometimes, which is something that Animaniacs kinda had, but not as much as Freakazoid. And there's also just the fact that, for as weird as Animaniacs was, you kind of accept it because, the show is about 3 silly cartoon characters. Their whole brand is that they're insane. Or Pinky and the Brain is about 2 lab mice that want to take over the world. You've already kind of suspended your disbelief and just think anything can happen. But in Freakazoid, while it's true that it's about an insane character, he's still a human. The characters are all still human. So you kind of have this expectation of things being toned down a bit, but things are just cranked up to not even 11, but to 12 basically the entire time. And the humor just really requires you to just be all for it. I wouldn't necessarily say the show might be annoying to someone, but it's something that you really just have to understand for it to be funny. So when kids watched it, they probably thought, I don't get it. I want to see Animaniacs instead, which is something the show actually makes a joke about. So the WB networks just kept changing its time slot. They thought, nobody wants to watch the show, just bury it. They gave it a worse time, they kept changing what time it was on. So by the time you got to season 2, I wouldn't be surprised if season 2 is made not because the show was successful enough to get a second season, but probably more so because they have probably ordered 2 seasons, so they said, we have to make a second season. But they decided to cut it short, though. And the show's final episode did actually feel like a final episode, to be fair, but it's really a shame the show got canceled like that, because, again, it was really just... Oh, I'm losing my train of thought. So, I feel like there were probably even adults watching this Freakazoid who just didn't understand it. So even if they saw it, they might have thought, well, I don't really want to see this that much. Or, yeah, it can be pretty funny, but I'd rather see something else. Because they might think like this. Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain were designed so that kids could enjoy them, but adults would enjoy them just as much. So the parents would be watching them with their kids, and they'd say, I love this just as much as my kids do. It's a great show. But for Freakazoid, if their kids don't want to see it, they think, well, I'm not going to watch it with my kids. So basically no one watched it after a while. And the show just kind of fell into the waysides of obscurity. And that's just really sad, because it's been said that if this show were aired at a better time, maybe marketed a bit better, it probably would have found a huge following. In fact, it kind of did. It ended in 1997, but it did reruns on Cartoon Network in about 2000, I think 2001, and the reruns were so successful they almost gave the show a 3rd season. But Cartoon Network ultimately decided that it was too expensive to produce more Freakazoids, so they decided to drop it. I will say this, much as I would have wanted that, and it was only a few years later too, these Spielberg cartoons are very much rooted in the 90s. Not that they make a lot of reference to the 90s, which they do, but if they were made in the 80s or the 2000s, they just wouldn't really have worked as well as they did. So, if it had gotten a 3rd season, it would have had to come right after the show's original run. But it is worth noting that Freakazoid, despite being pretty obscure, does actually have some kind of a legacy. There was a Teen Titans Go episode of all things where they do a crossover. They brought back all the original voice actors, and I watched it. And, well, I definitely don't like Teen Titans Go, just like most people do not like Teen Titans Go. The Freakazoid episode is actually really funny. Yes, it does have some of that annoying Teen Titans Go humor, but the episode is more so about Freakazoid, because that's what you came here to see. And it's also a bit weird to see the characters in the Teen Titans Go art style, but it does a good job respecting the show. The plot is just that the Lobe has teamed up with the Brain, so Robin says, if we're going to fight a 90s villain, we need a 90s hero. So they team up with Freakazoid, and the Teen Titans Go deal with just how wacky he is. But this crossover really pulls out all the stops. Like, Freakazoid's announcer, Joe, shows up. There was this joke in the original series that Freakazoid's announcer is, at first he's just the announcer, the narrator, the voice you hear. But eventually, a narrator starts speaking to the characters, and they start saying, come on, Joe, just be quiet. And then eventually he just appears as an actual character at some points. So they brought him back as an actual character. They bring back Cosgrove, and they do the exact same joke as the original series, with the whole Freakazoid is fighting a villain, and then he just stops to go hang out with Cosgrove. And the humor here in this scene just feels right on brand with the original show. They did a really good job here. And I like the Lobe here. He's not really in it that much, and he probably has the best. He probably fits into the Teen Titans Go art style the best, and it's just nice to see him here. Unfortunately, his voice actor passed away about a year or two ago, so rest in peace, David Warner. You were brilliant. Now, you might be wondering, if you've made it this far, okay, where can I watch Freakazoid? So, I watch it on MeTV Toons, which airs it once a week, but you probably don't have cable anymore, so if you want to watch it somewhere else, you can watch it on Tubi. So, I don't know when exactly it's being added, but it's all over animation fans that on March 1st, a ton of Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers shows are coming to Tubi for free. I don't know if Freakazoid's coming on March 1st, but it is going to be added later this year. And that's great, because Tubi is free. And the show does not stream anywhere else. It's not on Hulu, it's not on Max, it's not on Paramount Plus, Amazon, nothing. And you can't really buy the DVDs anymore because, much like the show itself, I'm assuming the DVDs just kind of flopped. See, the Season 1 DVD you can buy on eBay for something like $20. It's out of print, though. But the Season 2 DVD must have been a limited run because it goes for over $100 on the aftermarket, which is sad. And unfortunately, Warner Brothers never just decided to release them as the complete series or something, which they totally should have done. If they ever do that, I will buy it, but it is nice that if you do want to watch the show, it is actually pretty accessible despite its obscurity. Or at least it's going to become accessible. So that was all I have to say about Freakazoid. I mean, I could say more, but that would require going so in depth. I hope that if any of you guys did stick around to the end, that maybe you're interested in it. Maybe you'll want to watch a few clips on YouTube or something, because Freakazoid is a really great show that I think is just really deserves more love. I really wish it got a third season, and a fourth. I do think that if Freakazoid had gone on long enough, it could have been even better than Animaniacs. That's just how good it was, and I am glad that it does still have fans. I mean, that Teen Titans Go crossover, I bet nobody expected that, but they did it. And like the original voice actors have talked about how much they enjoyed that. And it was just, it's great to see Freakazoid whenever he does show up. If he really should have gotten a comic book. In fact, we're never going to bring back the show itself. They really should make a Freakazoid comic book. I read that. That's all for now. And remember to stay way past cool.